The Article of the Week routine is a way for students to practice their nonfiction reading skills. At the same time, it's also meant to give students an opportunity to develop their knowledge on important issues and events around the world. At the start of any Article of the Week, students should review the instructions in the top box. Many of the instructions will be the same each week, such as recording annotations within the text or putting specific comments in the margin. The goal is to encourage students to talk to the text, to show active reading, to go beyond simply scanning a document and into thinking about what the document is saying and how the author is expressing their meaning. In addition, students should read the instructions carefully to find any specific focus areas that apply just to that text. In this article, Measuring the Value of College, students are looking in particular at how articles present evidence. In this case, there are arguments for a college education and arguments against it, so students should be solid underlining the arguments for and dotted underlining the arguments against. Please take the time to carefully review the instructions each time you sit down to read an Article of the Week. Once you've reviewed the instructions and know what you're looking for, your next step is to quickly read the document. Before students are able to thoroughly mark up the focus areas, it's important to understand what the reading is trying to express. As you read the paragraphs the first time through, it may be appropriate to mark some small comments in the margins. For example, as I read these first sentences, this is a very strong piece of language that's meant to catch the audience's attention. So I'm going to put a short exclamation point here at how to show the author's use of surprising or interesting language right from the beginning. As I continue to read the first page of the article, I may also notice how each paragraph is presented by a different author from a different source, and each of them then has a different perspective on the passage. And so I might note that this first author presents bold claims on both sides. And I'll record that comment in the margin so that I remember this later on. When I read the second article, noting the topic sentence, I can see that the second author within this piece has a little bit more of a negative opinion. And they begin that right from the start by identifying that the truth is a little more complicated than the original author presented. And so next to this margin, I might note that the author provides more negative evaluation on college value. And what I'm doing is I'm keeping a running record in my margins of what I'm thinking as I read through the article. In this next paragraph, perhaps I note that the focus is on degrees and how they fit into the workforce. And then the final paragraph I can say is focused on big goals for education. Once I read through the article and get some general comments in the margin, now I can return back to the top and focus on my instructions. So I need to be solid underlining and dotted underlining based upon the specific arguments that the article is presenting. As I read this first paragraph, again, this strong language that I noted before are reasons that the authors think college might not be as valuable. And this is often the trickiest part of the article because it requires students to show that they understand what they're reading. Before I can begin to dotted underline or solid underline, I need to make sure I'm thinking about what the reading says so that I'm able to tell what are positive arguments and what are arguments against the value of college. In this case, looking at how the costs are going up, which leads to more student debt, and many of those students still aren't finding good jobs, that's clearly a negative argument. But in the next sentence, it talks about how the Federal Reserve banks says that a four-year degree has never been more worth it. And then they give some specific numbers. In this case, the idea that students who graduate from college earn more than $300,000 more than a student with just a high school education. That's a very strong argument using a specific statistic. If you imagine that a person works for at least 30 years over their lifetime, the Federal Reserve is suggesting that in those 30 years they may be making as much as $10,000 more than a person without that degree, because they're able to get access to higher paying jobs or promotions that might not happen for people who are just in the high school graduates. And so at the end of this, he's saying that despite all the problems, Mr. Short still thinks that it's worth it to attend college. As I read through the next paragraph, I'm not going to mark anything that is considered more of a topic sentence like this paragraph, because it's not clear what the position is. But when I read the next paragraph, Mr. Weissman is saying that the bottom 25% of college degree holders, meaning college graduates, earn no more than the typical worker with a high school diploma. So he's looking a little closer at the statistics and saying that not all college graduates earn more than people with a high school diploma. Sometimes it depends more on the job or the person. And so many of these people are going in and paying for a expensive degree, and they aren't getting the value from it. And in the next sentence, he elaborates a little further by saying that it may be more useful to get a technical degree than going to a four-year college, right? Especially because, as he says, it may not be worth the cost of going to college if you're not getting a return on your investment. In this next paragraph, where the author's focusing on jobs, they point out as much as some jobs require candidates to have a degree, that's showing that you probably might want to have a degree if you want to get into those colleges. They're noting that not all of those jobs actually use the skills from the degree, but still, even in a job like I'm a supervisor of mechanics, most of those employers want a person with a college degree, even when not many people have it. So that's another strong argument to have one of those degrees. Finally, at the end, this author's focusing on the big goals. And for a lot of students, it's not all about money. Oftentimes, when people think about if they want to go to college or not, they focus on what they're going to learn there. And I think this final argument is a strong case that there are benefits to going to college beyond how much money you're going to make later on. The back of this document gave a lot of students trouble as well. Infographics are a growing part of how we learn about topics. A lot of times infographics combine images, symbols, texts, and statistics, and they require students to balance a few different ideas in their head. In this case, you have to think of the introduction just like an introduction to a body paragraph. This is the point where the author is going to set their main idea. And so in this case, they're emphasizing that beyond just the jobs and salaries college educations get, there are other benefits that college education provides. When you're looking at infographics, it's important to look at the whole piece of the picture and not just the specific numbers. Many students looked at these numbers and they thought that they meant 32% of Americans are workers with high school diplomas. That's not actually what the infographic is trying to show us. When you look at the subtitle of this part of the infographic, you can see that it's about how much people enjoy their employment. In the introduction, they give a little bit of a background piece of information showing that many Americans spend a lot of time at work, and how important it is then to have a job that they find interesting and stimulating is the word that they use. The mini title here is Learning While Earning, which is trying to show us that what they're providing are the numbers of workers between the ages of 30 and 45 who feel that they need to continually learn new things. And so 56% of people with a bachelor's degree feel like they have to continually learn while they are in their jobs. Only 32% of workers with high school diplomas do. So a student might record a note here thinking that 24% more of jobs with college degree require us to keep learning. And if we think back to Thomas Friedman's article about how lifelong learning is a way to keep ourselves active and to better enjoy the world around us, that might be a very valuable statistic to understand. This infographic is showing how workers aged 30 to 45 are satisfied with their work compared to different degrees. And so in this case, 51% of workers with a bachelor's degree are very satisfied with their work, but only 42% are very satisfied, right? And so we might think 9% more college grads are satisfied. That seems small, but it may be worth it. And here's where I might put a question mark next to this so that I can think more about it. Is that chance of being more satisfied with your job worth the cost of a college education? For some people, it might be, especially if we're looking at the different skills a person gains, which is what the personal development section is. Right? These are showing the unique opportunities that college may give. And if you look, a lot of these skills relate to what we learned about at the beginning of the school year on the purpose of education. The final piece is talking about social mobility, which is how it increases the chances that adults may move up the socioeconomic ladder, meaning how well they succeed based upon their salaries, their jobs, and the careers. It also notes that this has an impact on the lives of their family members. And there's this large gap between people who are college degree holders and people who do not graduate from a four-year degree. So there's a almost 20% increase in the number of people who move steps on the ladder based upon gaining those degrees. Okay? As I finish up with this, it may be worth noting the source of the document so I know how credible or reliable this information is. Oftentimes, reading through an article of the week will require students to look at the document more than once so that they can complete all the tasks that Mr. Angelini expects, and especially so that they can do so accurately. For difficult readings, this is an important part of the process. We need to be able to understand what's in front of us and not just finish it. So I encourage students to take the time to do that well and not simply take the time to get it done.